Oh, hello world. All right, it's May 19th, and I want to talk to you about a book that I loved reading. I read it a number of years ago, and I read it again today. It's a short story, all right? Um, and this is the beginning of a series of book reviews that I'm going to be doing. I want to say before I begin that on this night, May 19th, less than 5 minutes ago, here I am in Los Angeles, and there was a loud explosion that went off, and it sounded like a firework, but it was so much closer, so much nearer to home that yeah, it's very startling and unsettling to hear. It's just a massive explosion. Um, it's probably the fifth or sixth time that we've heard explosions like that within this past week, I would have to say. What's going on? I have no idea. All right, so try to make this as quick as possible, but this is a book review, and the title of the book is The Bet by Anton Chekhov. And what I want to say first is that I haven't always been a reader, and when I was in high school, for instance, I couldn't sit down and read a book. I was antsy, and my attention and focus was very limited. These days, I'm using audiobooks to help me read, and I found that my focus is much sharper. All right. Today, I listened to this audiobook. It only was an 18-minute story. So I was able to listen to it, rather quickly. Oh, and because I am or I was, a bad reader, I chose short stories. I chose to begin practicing my reading or improving my reading by reading short books, so as to build up my endurance, so to speak. Okay? All right, so I gravitated towards Anton Chekhov's books, and I fell in love with his stories. I believe the first story of Anton Chekhov I read was The Slanderer. And after The Slanderer, then I moved on to, other books, and I guess I found this one somehow. This is called The Bet by Anton Chekhov, all right? So there are spoilers in this book review. So, but hey, the story was written in the 1800s, so by now, spoilers are everywhere. But I'm just going to give you the story. So the story is about the banker and the lawyer. We are told that the lawyer is 25 years of age, all right? And the banker probably, maybe a few years older, what have you. Well, there is a discussion. There's a party that takes place. And at that party, there's a discussion, there's a debate, and the debate is about whether capital punishment, ending someone's life, is a more moral end, or a more moral means of punishment than life imprisonment, or is life imprisonment more moral than capital punishment? All right. So they're weighing these two things, these two punishments. Do you kill the person who has committed some offense, or do you imprison them for life? Which is more humane? All right. So the banker and the lawyer take different sides. And the lawyer's position is that it is better to live somehow, by any means, it's better to live than it is to not live at all. This is the position that the lawyer takes. And the banker, takes the opposite. And he says it is better to end the life. Okay? And they make this wager that the lawyer says, hey, you can imprison me for a number of years. And the point of, let's see, the lawyer says it's better to live. Well, at some point, they begin to argue about whether or not the lawyer can survive imprisonment. And the lawyer says, yes, I can survive imprisonment. I can survive 5 years of imprisonment. I can survive 10 years of imprisonment. I can go as long as 15 years as a prisoner. And the banker says, no, you cannot. The banker says life imprisonment is a far worse punishment than capital punishment. And so he says, you could not do it for 5 years, let alone 10 years or even 15 years. And so this is the basis of the bet. The banker says you cannot survive life imprisonment, and the lawyer says, well, yes, I can. They make the bet. The lawyer says he can be a prisoner for 15 years. And the two men agree. The banker agrees that a banker agrees to pay the lawyer $2 million if the lawyer can remain imprisoned for 15 years, if he can give up 15 years of his life. All right. And if he cannot do this, well, if the lawyer cannot remain imprisoned for 15 years, then he will not receive the $2 million. Otherwise, the banker has to pay $2 million. It's one heck of a bet. It's one heck of a bet. One man has to give up 15 years of his life, and the other man has to give up $2 million. Now, in the 1800s, $2 million is a far greater amount, to those individuals than it is perhaps, to us today. We're probably talking, billions of dollars in today's money, right? So consider for yourself, what would you do? Would you give up 15 years of your life for billions of dollars, later on? Okay. Well, that's essentially what the lawyer decided to do. Now, the bet stipulates that the lawyer, while he is imprisoned, he must give up, his freedom, and he is not to see people. He is not to see people. He is not to hear a human voice. He is not to receive letters nor newspapers. So these are all of the stipulations. He must, be in solitude for 15 years. However, he may have access to instruments, in particular a piano. He may read books, drink wine, smoke tobacco, write letters. He can write letters, send them out, okay? And he can communicate in silence with notes, all right? So these are the things that he can do, all right? So they agree to this bet. The lawyer is going to give up 15 years of his life, and the banker is going to pay him if he can give up those 15 years. But the banker is betting that he cannot stand solitude for such a long period of time like that. So what happens? The story tells us that in the first year, in year one, the lawyer is overcome with loneliness and boredom, and he plays the piano. He rejects wine and tobacco, and he reads light books, books about crime, books about love, okay? And that's how he gets through the first year. Then it goes on to tell us in the second year, he stops playing the piano, and he requests only the classic novels, of the classic books, all right, in year 2. And then they skip and they tell you about year 5. He makes it to 5 years of this solitude. He says by the 5th year, he's playing the piano again. There's music. Music can be heard from, from his quarters again. Then he begins to drink wine. He begins to, his days are basically filled with him eating, drinking, and lying on his bed. That's solely, by the 5th year, that's all he's doing. And he is observed, all right? They're keeping tabs on him. He's observed yawning. They see him yawning. They see him talking angrily to himself, okay? And they observe that he writes a lot, but he'll spend a number of hours writing, but the next day he will take everything that he's written and he will tear it up and destroy it and then throw it away. And he's also heard weeping, crying, okay? So these were all of his experiences during the 5th year, all right? And then they go on to say in the 6th year he begins to focus on learning languages, and he studies philosophy, all right? And he becomes extremely proficient in his language studies. And the lawyer creates the lawyer creates a procedure by which he's able to validate his proficiency at a language. So what he does is he writes letters in the different languages that he has studied. He passes those notes, outside of his quarters, and the banker and the watchman outside of, his quarters. I didn't mention that there was a watchman, but there's always a watchman outside of his quarters. He passes the notes to the watchman, and the watchman sends the letters to native speakers of those languages. And he said in his letters, if I have not made a mistake in communicating in your language, then please confirm this by firing a shot, okay, as a signal, as if to say, you've done a good job of learning, this language, okay? So there he is in his quarters. He's written all of these letters in a number of different languages. He passes the letter to the watchman. The watchman sends these letters to individuals who speak these languages, and these people verify, yes, he has learned our language sufficiently. He has communicated very well in our language, etc., etc. All of those letters are then returned to the watchman, and the watchman must fire a shot. And so when the lawyer hears that shot, he says, yes, I have received confirmation. Because remember, the lawyer cannot have communication, cannot communicate directly with people. So that gunshot is the sound that verifies his ability to communicate in that language. Only in writing, okay? All right. Then they skip to the 10th year. He makes it 10 years in solitude. Again, he's reading books, drinking wine, smoking tobacco. He's writing letters, and he's only communicating in silence, with his notes. He's studying, reading the classic books, reading language, learning languages, learning philosophy. In the 10th year, okay, he dedicates himself to reading the Bible, reading the New Testament, only the New Testament. He finishes the New Testament, and then he goes and reads about the history of religion. And then he's curious about the natural sciences, and then he focuses on Shakespeare and other, classic works. So he does all of this, all right, and they document, you know, 10 years of his imprisonment. And then we get to the 15th year, all right. Now, the story begins in the bet was made in 1870, and so it is now 1885, all right. It's actually November 14th, from November 14th, 1870 to November 14th, 1885. And the bet ends at 12, I believe it's midnight. It could be 12 noon because it's about 3 o'clock on the day of the on the last day of this bet. It's at 3 o'clock. It could be 3 p.m. and then at midnight, that's when the bet is over. Or it could be that it was 3 in the morning and then it was at midday. I think it's midnight. Okay, well, it's about 3 o'clock when on the final day, the banker says 15 years have passed and I've gambled away a lot of my money. I put a lot of money in the stock market and I've lost a lot of my money. And over those 15 years, he isn't as rich as he was, 15 years prior. And he says, well, the lawyer has lasted this long, 15 years, and come midnight or at 12 o'clock, what at midnight or midday, at 12, if the lawyer remains in his quarters, past 12 o'clock, he wins this bet and I have to pay him $2 million. Those $2 million, I need them. I am going to be bankrupt for the rest of my days. This is what the thinking. This is what the banker is thinking. So he's worried about his money and he's thinking, how am I going to get out of this situation? So what he does is he imagines, hey, maybe I need to kill this guy. I need to kill him so he doesn't win this bet because he's already done what he said he was going to do. He's lasted, 15 years. The banker says, I didn't think he would last 5 years, and here it is, 15 years. And now I have to pay this man. So he wants an out. He wants to know, he's thinking of options. Maybe I should kill this guy. Well, what happens is the banker goes into the man's quarters and he finds this emaciated, long-haired man who, is basically a shell of himself. And he finds him, asleep on the table with his head resting on his hand. And on the table, there's a note that has been written by the lawyer, by this man. And the banker is thinking, wow, this is a perfect opportunity. All I need to do is, the guy is a shell of himself. He's so feeble. All I have to do is pick him up, throw him on the bed, grab the pillow, suffocate him, and he's gone. All right? But the banker doesn't act quickly. He notices that there is a note on the table, and so he grabs the note and he begins to read it. And what he reads is a message from the lawyer stating that over the last 15 years of his imprisonment, he has lived a full life vicariously through reading all of these books. And he said that he has, through the books, he has loved, and he has loved many women, and he has hunted many animals. He has climbed many mountains. He has, enjoyed, sex, and he has eaten fine meals, and he's drunk the finest wines. All in his mind, all there through the books that he has read. And in some cases, because he actually did drink wine, then he did have some, fine wines and smoke some fine tobacco and whatnot. And he said, after all of these experiences right there from his room, he says in the letter that he despises. He despises. He said, the lawyer says he despises health, freedom, life, and the blessings of the world. He says he despises everything. And in the letter, he tells the banker, essentially, I don't want your money. And he says, I am planning to leave these quarters 5 minutes before 12 so that I will break the promise. I will break the bet. And so I will essentially lose the bet. And he's saying that because he's saying that I would rather lose this bet and reject everything in this life from, health, freedom, life, all of the blessings, the tobacco, the wine, the women. He says everything, the music. He says everything. He says, I despise it all. I don't want any of it. And so his plan is to leave and lose the bet. That's the man's plan. And imagine the banker, just moments before reading the note from the lawyer, the banker was thinking of killing this man because he believed that this bet would ruin him at this point in his life. And so what happens? Well, the banker feels a great sense of contempt for himself. He hates self-loathing. He hates himself. And he's like, this is unbelievable. And so the banker wept. The banker cries. And then the banker goes to sleep. And then the watchman, the watchman gives an account, and he says the watchman tells the banker that he watched as the man ran away 5 minutes or so before the bet was up. And for proof that that he won the bet, he keeps the letter and he puts the letter in the safe. And that's the end of the story. The bet. So that's the story. And it's a phenomenal story because it really makes you wonder, like, wow, after 15 years, of living vicariously, the lawyer arrived at the conclusion that he didn't want to have anything to do with life at all. He wasn't interested in taking his money and doing whatever with it. He said, no, you can have your money. And so this really puts into perspective, where it really forces you to wonder, like, what do you truly value? What is truly valuable to you in this life? Like, that's the book. That's the bet. Anton Chekhov, phenomenal writer, Russian writer, phenomenal story. It's a short story, 18 minutes. It took me 18 minutes to listen to the audio book. It might take 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes to read the story. Yeah, I love it though. All right, just wanted to share that with you. Peace.